Today I'm meeting with a former mediator, Sue Campbell, and I'm grateful that she's willing to speak with me today because as someone who was a mediator, I believe that she'll be able to give you a more candid assessment of mediation, and that, for good and for ill. But because she's not doing that, you can listen to her with more of a she has more credibility as someone who's not trying to say, oh, well, mediation's wonderful. And by the way, it's especially wonderful with me because she's not mediating any longer. And Sue, if I understand correctly, you are a therapist, so you still engage in therapy services. You just
marriage
don't
and family therapy, marriage, family, and individual therapy at a very limited level.
Yes. And that you're just not doing mediations anymore because you're interested in focusing on your therapy practice and a limited clientele at that. And so mediation was just too much on your plate. So you've stopped doing mediations.
Right.
How long were you in providing mediation services?
My training began in 1999. I was with Kathy, I can't remember her last name.
Elton?
Kathy Elton. Yes, I did my training with her. I did a combination. Let me give you this. This might help you to know this. I've got this somewhere here. The training is, well, let me tell you this. The training was for domestic, juvenile victim offender, school truancy, business, small claims court, and that sort of thing. So the training there was quite a bit of training that went through this.
So you're clearly a veteran and you've clearly earned your stripes as a mediator, not one of those people who dipped her toe into it for a year or two and then decided to stop.
No.
And so I'm glad that she shared that with us because this is someone who can tell you about what makes for good and for bad mediations and what you can expect. And along those lines, just helping people to understand what mediation is and is not. Now, I told Sue before we started that she's aware that I'm a practicing divorce and family lawyer and that I'm a mediator as well. I don't do a lot of mediations, but that I also am kind of soured on mediation. And we'll talk about that too. It's not going to be the Eric Johnson show. It's going to be an interview of Sue Campbell. But I think we'd both benefit as viewers and as interviewee to talk about those things so that people get an idea of different perspectives on mediation. So before we begin and go any further, for those that may like the cut of your jib, Sue, where can they contact you if they would like to utilize your marriage and family therapy services?
I am not with a company. I am in my own home office. My phone number is 435-760-1788, and they can call me. And if they don't get me, it's good to leave a message because I don't know the difference between a good call and a spam call. So.
Exactly. Thank you very much for that. Let's dive right in on mediation. So let's, for those of you that are watching or listening, Sue was not given a list of questions in advance. Sue was not told that we need you to answer certain questions. So this is going to be a candid, and you're going to get it right off the top of her head as she's talking about this, which I think is good because people tend to be more forthcoming when they're not overly prepared or even somewhat prepared, if you ask me. So let me ask you this first. As I said, one of the things I don't like about mediation in divorce and family law settings, so let's make sure we make that clear first. Mediation can differ in the employment realm. Mediation can differ in business settings, and mediation can differ in criminal prosecution settings. And there's different dynamics and different factors that come into play, just as there are different factors in family law. One of the things I don't like about mediation in family law is people that are forced to go to mediation. Now, for people that are just about to go through a divorce or in the early stages, you'll hear about mediation, and a lot of you may hear how wonderful it is and inexpensive. And we'll talk about that and what's true and what's false about that. But you're forced to go to mediation. And I've found that when people are told, hey, you, sit down and negotiate with me, it tends to make people want to do neither. They neither want to sit down nor negotiate very much. Whereas if they both said, we don't want to fight, we don't want to stay married anymore, or we need to resolve our child custody dispute, then they're more willing to sit down if they think, I believe that even though we don't like each other very much, even if we can negotiate, that'll save us time, that'll save us a lot of money, that'll save us a lot of litigation hassles. And if we can come up with a better deal than what the judge would impose upon us, then everybody wins. But when people are forced to sit down and communicate and negotiate, it tends to start out immediately with, well, I don't trust you anyway. I don't like you anyway. I won't give you the time of day. Why would I give you hours of my time to talk about subjects that I don't really particularly like to talk about and that I don't particularly believe you will honor your agreements?
Okay,
What are your thoughts?
One of the things that we do at the beginning is gives them the rules of mediation. One of the things is anyone can withdraw from mediation at any time, including the first 5 minutes if they want. Mediation is not, now you may be required to go to mediation, but you're not required to complete mediation.
That's a good point. Yeah, you're required to at least try it.
To show up. You're required to show up.
And technically, 5 minutes could or could not be accurate because you are expected to go in good faith. So if someone could show that you showed up in 5 minutes and left, it's like, how could you possibly have known in 5 minutes that this wasn't worth your time? But yes, Sue's correct that you're not required to go through half a day or a whole day of mediation, even if after half an hour or so you are convinced that this person isn't negotiating with you in good faith. Yeah. That's an excellent way to start. All right, what about why do I have to sit down here and negotiate with somebody I don't trust? I mean, even if they promised me certain things, I wouldn't believe it, or I think they would try to take advantage of me, or they'd interpret it in such a way as to be meaningless.
So one of the things about trust is some people really don't want to see each other. And so I did one, I may have done more than one. I did one where we had breakout sessions, did Zoom, we had breakout sessions, and the couple never did see each other. They came and they went into the breakout session and I moved back and forth between them.
So one of them was in a virtual room where they could not see or hear the others. And
exactly.
then the other party was in a breakout room with or without an attorney, depending upon whether they brought an attorney. And they could not see or talk with each other.
Both of them had attorneys and one of them also had an advocate.
Okay.
Now,
and then you would, just before you do anything, but you would move back and forth virtually between these rooms.
Exactly.
So one would say, so kind of like that old time, that the thing we did as kids on the playground. It's like, well, go tell Sue that I don't want to be her friend anymore. And so somebody would come over there and say, hey, Eric wants you to know that he doesn't want to be your friend, Sue. And then Sue would say, well, now you go tell Eric that I didn't want to be his friend anymore. So now that's a negative example, but that's how you do it. They communicate with each other through you.
We call that shuttle mediation.
Right, because you shuttle back and forth between the parties.
I get the terms, but what are the concerns? What do you feel about each concern as I talk with each one? What have you agreed on? So usually they have started their divorce. I usually suggest they either get an attorney or that they go online to the to the location where you can get that divorce online. I think it's Utah law. I'm not sure. Anyway.
I can tell you what it is. It's the Utah courts. So it's utcourts.gov, utcourts.gov. And then you can go to either certain forms pages or what's known as the Online Court Assistance Program, OCAP. And that's a situation where it will ask you questions, and kind of like Mad Libs, after you've given all the information, it will create a list, a series of documents with your information filled in. And you can either use those to file for divorce or to create an uncontested or settled agreement for divorce through OCAP. So you're saying get an attorney to advise you, or if you don't have an attorney or don't want an attorney or can't afford an attorney, then you might want to try OCAP to help give you some introduction to the process and what needs to be covered.
Now, we do have a pro bono situation. If you cannot afford an attorney, you can apply to the court for a pro bono, in other words, a free mediation. And I think that's up to 3 or 4 hours worth of our time. We don't get paid either way. We are volunteers. Well, no, for some things I am not. I do have to do a certain pro bono each year.
Right. There's a certain number that every court annexed mediator has to provide a certain number of pro bono hours. And so, and everybody, as a lawyer, people will often contact me and other lawyers and they'll say, can I get a free lawyer? A lot of people think that anytime you're involved in a lawsuit, you have a lawyer appointed for you. So we'll take a minute right now. That is not correct. Rarely do you get a lawyer appointed for you, except in certain circumstances. In family law, that rarely happens, except in perhaps a termination of parental rights case. But in a divorce, there are no court-appointed free of charge lawyers. You could try to find someone who runs a charitable organization or is part of a charitable organization that provides pro bono, which is just another term for free of charge legal services. But nobody is entitled to that. And the only way you can get pro bono in a divorce or child custody situation is either by qualifying for these subsidized or reduced fee places, or by having somebody with a charity or just a private attorney willing to represent you free of charge. So the good news is you don't have to hire a lawyer to go through a divorce.
Right.
But if you do want to use the services of a lawyer, you are not entitled to appointment of a lawyer like you would if you were a criminal defendant.
Okay. But I think it's good to have the mediation because it gives you a chance. Quite often, communication has been very difficult between a couple that are getting a divorce. And sometimes with someone in a neutral position, it's a little easier to have that discussion, whether you're in the same room or whether you're in breakout rooms. So I have them first identify what are the issues. And each one, I put them on a, so here are the issues down the middle. Each one is on one side of the issue. What do they want? What do they want? What's the other one want? And then what have you agreed on? Where have you agreed? And so if there's a decree or a divorce has been filed, we look through to see what do you agree on. So we don't even worry about those. What do you not agree on? So we look at those. And if they're each, talking, I give each of them time to talk, listen, talk, listen. And then we discuss for a while, what are the options? What can you do? Sometimes I'll ask a question, what if this happened? What if whatever? And then I will caucus with them. So I will see one at a time in my office, or if it's on, well, actually I don't do them in my office. I do them in a courthouse or somewhere, because sometimes there can be some difficult situations, and there just needs to be some security in the building so that we're all okay.
Even if there's not a protective order in place, people can get upset and tempers can rise. So it's nice to be able to go outside and grab the bailiff.
It is.
Okay.
So anyway, I will sit down with one and say, well, what is the lowest you would, or what is the highest, or, kind of find out where their limits are both ways. And I'll say, can I pass this on to the other person? Or do you want to do that? And, we'll do it either way. So then I'll caucus with the other person and find out what are find out kind of where the points are that they are a little bit willing to be flexible.
So a caucus would just be a discussion that you're having with one side as to what their bottom line is and whether they're willing to show those cards up front or that sort of a thing. That's what a caucus is.
That's right. And so if I do the shuttle mediation, I'm going back and forth. Well, here's their new term. Here's their new offer, whatever, and get it as close as we can to an agreement, and then come back together and maybe finish that. And sometimes they don't come to agreement. Sometimes they say, well, we can, I'll say, if you cannot come to agreement, that's okay. We'll just say it was not decided, it was not agreed upon, and you will go to the judge and the judge will decide. And that's okay, And I try to make that as calm as possible. But when they think, but now what do you think the judge will do? And when we start talking about that, then they start realizing that they really don't have to turn it over to the judge. They really can decide as a couple to do this. And I've often seen them choose to decide. And well, okay, well, I'll give up this, but if you'll give up that, okay, well, we're good. Then I write up a memorandum of understanding, and that has all the information they need. Now, that is not something you take to the judge. That's something you use to either write up your own divorce papers together, or you each take to your lawyer, and probably one of those will write that up. I do not write up any divorce papers,
Okay.
any child custody papers, any visitation. I do not do the court work. I'm only there as a neutral bystander, neutral person to work them through these situations.
Can people reach a partial settlement agreement where they settle some of the issues in mediation and then they only have fewer issues that they have to take to court for a trial?
Absolutely. The best they can do is to look at all of the, I mean, everything and try to do as much as they can. And then if they're stuck on a few of them, that's what they take to court. Now, I will often ask, what is the best interest for this child? What do you each want for this child? And then we start talking about, as parents, what do you hope for your child? What do you look for? What are you wanting to do to make sure your child has a good life? And I'll list those on the board. And sometimes that shifts a little bit because they've been looking at what I want, what I want, what I want. And then what will happen with the kids? How will they do best? How will they grow? And how will they become happy with life? You know, my children.
Do you ever find yourself having to check your inclination to offer advice or to make it a therapy session given your background in marriage and family therapy? Or can you keep a wall between the two?
I'm pretty good at not doing that, but I can ask questions that a mediator might not think of. Well, so what about when this happens? Or what about when this happens? Because when you get them looking at the bigger picture, sometimes it changes things for them a little bit.
Some people think that a mediator can give advice. Is that correct?
We're not supposed to.
Because you're a neutral trying to help the parties reach their own agreements. You can be a sounding board. You can ask questions and get them to consider the implications of their positions. But
I can also say some people do this, some people do this, some people do this. I can give them bigger options than they've thought of, but I do not decide for them, and I don't tell them what's the best.
Well, but do you have any power to impose anything on them, like a ruling or an order, like a judge can?
Nope.
Okay. Well, surely, at least if they don't settle in mediation, you can go to court and tell the court how unreasonable and inflexible one side or the other was, correct?
I don't do that.
Okay.
I don't ever.
Now, that's something a lot of people who don't understand about mediation. They think, well, if I don't bring a lawyer, the mediator can advise me. Wrong. Another thing is like, well, the mediator can give me ideas. Wrong. The mediator can say, like you pointed out, I've seen people do this, I've seen people do that. I know that some people do this or do that. I'm not suggesting to you you should do any of those things. I'm just telling you these are some ways other people have done them, and maybe one of those you choose, or maybe that inspires you to think of something that will work for your family.
I might offer the chance to brainstorm.
Yeah. Finally, it's like, oh, well, you can see just how difficult my spouse has been. Well, Sue, I'm going to subpoena you to come to trial and just testify as to all the terrible things and how inflexible and uncooperative my spouse was. You can't do that either.
We cannot be subpoenaed.
Yeah. Now, why is that? Why can't you come and testify as to what happened? Why can't you come into court and make recommendations?
We're neutral. We are not. We're not there. We're not custody evaluators.
Okay? And you're not judges.
And we're not judges.
And you're not expert witnesses.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Exactly.
And another thing that people need to understand is that if they knew that the evaluator could go to the court and make recommendations or testify as to what happened and give opinions on who's being reasonable or unreasonable and what's best for the kids, how likely are these people to talk with you and with each other candidly if they knew that it's going to get back to court?
Not likely.
Right. Now, something that you may have heard in your training and other people watching or listening might not be aware of is that settlement negotiations are not admissible in evidence at trial. And the reason for that is so that people won't have to worry about having an idea that can be held against them later, such as, well, he had this idea or she had this idea or made this proposal. So that shows you that this person has a drinking problem, or he or she wouldn't have offered to get an ignition interlock or go to AA for 6 months. And it could be a situation where somebody says, I don't have a drinking problem, but if I can get you to give me something I want, I might be willing to go to AA or something like that. So that is why in mediation, if you're thinking, oh, wait till the judge hears what you said in mediation, the judge never will. So that's a good thing for people to remember.
Okay.
Let me tell you a couple of things about, I just feel like a lot of people go to mediation and it's really just to test each other's resolve, but they really have no intention of making a deal unless somebody simply rolls over and gives one whatever one wants. And so, do you know of ways that you can help people who have problems with trust that aren't so serious as like, oh, gee, I agree, I wouldn't trust this person either. What can people do to prepare for and engage in mediation productively without feeling like they have to hold hands and sing Kumbaya?
Well, part of what's happening is that these people are becoming independent of each other. And I would encourage the independence. You're going to be living your life. He's going to be living his. What do you want to have in this life? What do you want to, and how do you want your child to be involved in this life? So let's make sure you agree to things that you really want to have. Because if you agree and it goes to court and the judge signs it, you're stuck. Is that the question you were asking?
Well, it is. What if I'm just like, well, that doesn't sound like a good reason to go to, what if somebody says, that doesn't sound like a good reason to go to mediation. I might as well just go to trial. I don't trust this person. I don't like this person. This person may have all sorts of great ideas, but won't stick to any of them, either because this person's a big fat flake or because this person is a liar. And so this person will say anything to get what he or she wants, but then won't uphold his or her end of the bargain. What do you say to people in those situations? Let's assume they're convinced that no matter what you do, within the confines of your abilities as a mediator, these people just say, nah, I'm here because I have to. I'm here to check that box and jump through this hoop. And while I wish I could trust my spouse or my co-parent, I just don't.
They can always come back to mediation. They can always take it back to court. If usually there's some sort of agreement by this certain date, or that this will be, they can set a deadline on things, that things will come out a certain way or that they will be agreed to. And if not, they'll come back to mediation or they'll go back to the judge. You can set it up for future checking, future reexamination.
But then, and again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Well, then why not just go, let's just bypass mediation altogether. I don't believe we're going to reach any kind of agreement. I don't trust my spouse to be reasonable or to be fair and honest. So let's just go to court.
You're welcome to just go to court. If that's what
well, then why do they make me go to mediation? Why do they make everybody do this? What are they thinking is going to happen? What are they hoping will happen?
Because some people have a great experience with mediation, and I'm so sorry that you didn't.
Yeah. What percentage do you see people settling in mediation? That's a good place that's a good direction to go.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I haven't done it for 3 years or 2 years.
Well, thank you for being honest about that, first of all, and not just pulling a number out of the air. So well, knowing that, did you see about, and remember, everybody's different. So some people, they're just at each other's throats the whole time. And it's like, well, clearly we're not surprised if they didn't settle. And other people come in saying, we just don't love each other anymore, but we both care about each other a great deal and we don't want to hurt each other. So we're not surprised when they settle. And then by the same token, we see people at each other's throats where somehow by some miracle, they reach agreement. And we can see people that we would fully expect to settle in mediation that turn into mortal enemies over the course of their negotiations.
Yeah.
But you can't, everybody's different. But in your career, what percentage, anecdotally, did you see people settle?
At least half settled.
Okay.
I don't think it was better. And some partially settled. And there were some that just left still feeling like they were enemies. And they get to choose that. We're not going to fix that for them. We're not going to force that for them. If they want to stay enemies, they can stay enemies. And it'll come back and it'll bite them at some point. Because if you make an enemy out of your spouse or ex-spouse, You know, it's not going to help.
Did you ever? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Divorced, and I have been on. My husband and I have been on a number of trips with my first husband and his wife. In fact, we're going to Lava Hot Springs this summer. We're going to go to Mexico in the fall, in the winter. We're friends. We're not the best of friends, but we're you know, we're on the same WhatsApp group. You know? So yeah, but we try to be really respectful of each other.
And how long has it been, if you don't mind my asking? How long has it been since you divorced?
1989.
So we're looking at.
Yeah, okay. I don't know.
34 years or so.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very heartening story, and thank you for sharing that with us. Honestly.
I've been married to my current husband, Mr. Pinkerton, for 23 years. We just passed our 23-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
And Mr. Campbell has been married to his wife almost exactly the same amount of time. And we are both happily married. In fact, we kind of cheered each other on not long ago.
Well, thank you for sharing that, especially because as a marriage and family therapist, it's nice to know that they don't have a corner on marital bliss and that they can get divorced. And secondly, that you have followed some of your own advice and was able to find happiness again and be happy as a remarried person, and that you defied the odds of a divorce, especially at 23 years. That's no small feat. I wanted to ask you a question. And this is something where I'll tell you up front, I rarely get an honest response from a lot of mediators. I think that you'll be the exception. How many people did you see in the course of your mediation career who settled out of exhaustion? Not because they thought they were making a good deal. In fact, in some cases, might have even thought this is a lousy deal, but I'm pooped. I can't take it anymore. Either I'm worn out financially, emotionally, or both, or I could keep fighting, but my ex has a stronger will than I do, and we're just going to fight forever if I don't put this to bed. How often did you see that?
Time is an interesting piece. If they don't decide that day, if they are tired, I might say, what if we stop mediation for today and we get back together in a week or a couple of days, however long you want, and try and let's complete it then.
Well, bless you for that. There's some mediators that'll go till 2 a.m.
No.
I think that's crazy.
I won't go for more than about 3 hours. 3 hours is about my max. I don't go that one. I don't do well after that. So I will say, when can we get back together? You know, and we'll stop the clock. And of course, I charge most of these. I mean, I do my pro bono one, and then I charge the others, or did anyway when I was doing it. We get back together, and it's amazing what has happened. You know, I've been thinking about this, and you know, I think maybe you were right. Or, yeah, I guess probably it wouldn't be fair for me to keep our son all that time. You know,
I'll lose my train of thought if I don't say, yeah, I think it's important. These half-day mediations are about ideal, but when you can schedule a full day, 6 to 8 hour mediation, and some people I think you'd agree. Tell me if I've got this wrong. They're so desperate to reach an agreement because they're running out of money, or because they're just so emotionally torn apart that they want to bring the bleeding to an end. So they just think, I think if I just spend a few more minutes on this, we'll reach agreement. Well, a few more minutes become a few more minutes, and a few more minutes until it's a few more hours. And I remember when I finally had enough, we were there till 2 a.m. and reached agreement. And I thought, I'm sure that we were so punch drunk by the end of that there's a lot of dumb things that we did in this agreement, that in lawyers and mediator and parties together. So I just think that's interesting. And if a proposal can't be slept on, or a few days go by and people like, well, take it or leave it, then it's probably a deal you shouldn't make, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like the idea. Any of the mediations I've done, if there was some time in between, it almost always was better when we came back together.
Did you ever do those things where people agreed in advance? It's like, we're going to mediate for 2 hours, and if we don't settle in 2 or 3 hours, we've already planned to come back. And then if we don't get that done, then we'll call it.
I don't know if they know that's.
Yeah. I've seen that where people have said, we're going to spend the first session kind of getting our bearings. And if we settle everything, that's great. It's not like we must come back. but we don't anticipate that we will, but we're going to use this. And so they kind of come in with less pressure on themselves, knowing it's more of a fact finding and idea, issue spotting idea. And then they come back saying, now we've discussed what the issues are. We kind of know where everybody stands initially. We will wait for 3 days or so or a week, and then we'll come back. And like you said, the magic of people have had things, had time to ruminate. Had time to think about things. And so they come back with a more realistic view and even a more, what would you say, flexible attitude.
Sometimes they need to do some research. Sometimes it's like, we're going to sell the house, we'll put this much, that, or we're going to do this and this and that. And I'll say, do you want to do some research? Do you want to check those assumptions out so that when we come back, you have more concrete information?
So that's, I think, one of the lessons we've just kind of developed here without naming it is there is no one way to do mediation. It must not be necessarily a full day. It must not necessarily be a half day. You can do it in 2 or 3 sessions if you want. Make it work for you, and don't try to force yourself into a scheme that you don't find particularly helpful to you and your spouse or co-parent.
Exactly. What my hope with this is that these people will learn how to communicate a little better with each other, even though they didn't do that too well in the marriage. Maybe they can learn as co-parents or former spouses to communicate just a little bit better, so that there's up the road, it's not as messy, it's not as traumatic.
I appreciate the time you've spent with me, and in our concluding remarks, or your concluding remarks, let me ask this, if you're comfortable with it. What would be the 3 things that you find make mediation a failure and that you wish people wouldn't do for their sakes? And what are 3 things that you wish people would do more of to prepare for and have a better experience in mediation so that they come up with an agreement that is mutually satisfactory?
I think the things I wish they wouldn't do is come in like a bull in the china shop and say, it'll be my way or the highway. This is the only thing I can do. To come in and be totally inflexible, to try to manipulate the other person, or to lie. Those are 3 things that are just destructive to mediation. They're destructive to life. And what I wish they would do is come in prepared, that they've done their homework. They know what their assets are. They know what they own. They know what the kids' needs are. And they know they've done a little bit of homework on their own.
And let me add this, because I think you'll agree. And they've had a plan A, B, and C that they've thought through. Yeah. And that doesn't mean they're going to end up with plan B or C necessarily. It could be something completely different, but at least have some idea of where your bottom line is. And that can change over the course of mediation, but at least you've thought about where you want to be and why.
Yeah, that they've given it. And that if they have plan A, B, or C, then you know that they're a little bit flexible. Well, if this wouldn't work, then maybe this will. So that means there will. So willingness to negotiate would be one. I think I gave another one there.
Be prepared. Be willing to negotiate.
Be willing to negotiate. Come in good faith, and try to preserve the relationship. I mean, try not to come in to destroy the other person, but to remain respectful.
And here's one I have for you. How important is it that the mediator understands my side of the story? So let me take 20 minutes to explain to you why my husband is such a bad man. Is that a productive use of the mediator's time or the parties?
No.
Right.
I will probably cut to the chase of that statement. What I'm hearing from you is that you were really hurt in this marriage, that you were really not listened to. We'll probably not be able to get him to listen to you today, but tell me, what are the facts that you want him to know? What would you like to determine here? What are your wants, desires?
Right. And along the same lines, it's like, we're here to make a deal. When you go to buy a car, the dealer's not going to be interested in why you need this to get to work. That's not going to change the price. So I can weep and I can play my violin and I can talk to you for 20 minutes about why I need to get this car for this amount of money. And the dealer's going to say, I know what I need to get to make this sale. And
Right.
so prevailing upon my sense of decency and pity isn't going to make a difference. And it's the same thing in mediation. While it is useful to the opposing party and sometimes to the mediator to tell a brief story to understand the issue and maybe understand one's position, you're not there for therapy and you're not there to vent your spleen. And I think a lot of people need to understand that too.
I might suggest to one or the other, you may want to find a therapist who can, and it can't be me. I cannot do both. I can only do one or the other. You might find a therapist who can help you work through these issues, because you deserve to feel better about your life. You deserve to feel better about yourself, and it will make you an even better parent.
I appreciate that.
That might be one thing I'd suggest.
Final question, who pays for the mediation?
The couple, it's supposedly half and half.
Okay. Can somebody pay for the whole thing if he or she wants to, or that's the only way they can go to mediation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There is a charge, and it has to be paid. And when I was doing it, it had to be paid up front. I'd take a Venmo, I'd take a, whatever, a check, but it had to be paid up front. And what I'd do is I'd charge them for, say, 3 hours or 2 hours. And then I say, okay, we've hit our 2 hours. Do we want to keep going? Do you want to come back? So that's one of the ways that I have an automatic stopping point.
Right. And there are others that will get paid at the end. That's true as well. Okay. Sue, this has been very refreshing. Thank you for telling it like it is. And thank you for being a little more of the optimist to my pessimist. And I hope that people that watched and listened were well served by this conversation. Thank you so much.
I hope that people will accept mediation. There are some great mediators out there. There are some that I would question. The one that my husband and his wife went to brought their daughter in as part of the mediation, and she had to watch them fight. And I thought, what in the world? I didn't get to be there. So, but I heard.
I think that's a very good point to end on too. It's just choose wisely. Not all mediators are created equally. They're not as experienced. They're not as well trained just because they qualified as a mediator.
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks again.
Okay.